church smelled of wildflowers and beeswax candles. Emily stood at the altar in her ivory dress, hands clasped tight around her bouquet. The whole town of Silver Creek had gathered. Her heart was a bird beating against her ribs, nervous, but happy. The organ stopped. Silence. The doors stayed shut. Whispers started, like dry leaves scratching across the floor. "Where is he?" someone muttered. Emily's stomach sank. James, her fiancé, was nowhere to be seen. The pastor's kind eyes shifted from her to the door and back again, waiting. Minutes passed. Then word arrived, and James had taken the noon stagecoach and left town. The bouquet fell from her hands. Emily felt her cheeks burn, her throat close up. She heard her mother's gasp, her father's muttered curse, the low ripple of gossip starting up in the pews. But she didn't cry. Not yet. She walked out of the church into the hot prairie sun, feeling like the whole world had turned its back on her. That night, she sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at the cold coffee pot. Her future, the one she'd built in her head for years, was gone. She promised herself one thing: she would never trust a man again. 3 days later, Emily was in the general store, head down, avoiding the stairs. The bell above the door jingled, and a tall stranger walked in. He was dusty from the trail, his hat pulled low, boots scuffed. His shirt was plain, his face unreadable, but there was something quiet and steady about him. He bought nails, rope, and a sack of coffee, then turned to find Emily staring. Their eyes met. He nodded politely. "Ma'am," she flushed, mumbling a greeting. Mrs. Dorsey, the storekeeper, beamed. "Emily, this here's Caleb Turner. Just bought the McIntyre place out by the creek. He's fixing it up." Caleb tipped his hat again. A week later, Emily's father's fence broke, letting the cattle wander. He cursed his bad knee and tried to fix it, but couldn't. Before Emily could offer to help, a voice came from the gate. "I can lend a hand." It was Caleb. He worked quietly, hammering boards and restringing wire. Emily held the post steady while he worked. "You don't talk much," she said, trying to fill the silence. He glanced up at her with a hint of a smile. "Only when I got something worth saying." She found herself smiling back. By the time the fence was mended, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky pink and gold. Caleb wiped his brow and gave her a small nod. "Thank you," Emily said softly. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Any man who'd leave you at the altar's a fool." Days turned into weeks. Caleb started stopping by more often, to help with the barn roof, bring fresh eggs from his hens, or just share a quiet coffee on the porch. Emily found herself laughing again, telling stories she hadn't told anyone in months. One evening, as the first stars came out, she asked, "Why did you come to Silver Creek?" He was silent for a long moment before answering. "Needed a place to start over." She waited, sensing there was more. "My brother, he died last winter. Place we had together didn't feel like home no more, so I came here." Emily's heart ached for him. She reached out, covering his hand with hers. "I'm sorry." He didn't pull away. Something passed between them in that quiet moment. Two broken hearts beginning to knit together. But happiness never comes easy in Silver Creek. One afternoon, James rode back into town. He strolled into the saloon like nothing had happened, bragging about the money he'd made prospecting. When word reached Emily, her stomach turned. That evening, James came to the farm. "I made a mistake, Em," he said, his tone slick. "But I'm back now. We can pick up where we left off." Before Emily could answer, Caleb stepped out of the barn, jaw set. "She's not yours to come back to," he said quietly. James sneered. "And who are you, stranger?" Weeks later, on a crisp autumn morning, Emily stood on the same church steps where her heart had once broken. But this time, she wasn't wearing white one, she wore a simple blue dress. Caleb stood beside her, hat in his hands, his quiet smile meant only for her. The town gathered again, but this time there were no whispers, only warmth. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Emily felt tears slip down her cheeks, not from heartbreak, but from joy. Caleb squeezed her hand and whispered, "You were worth the wait," and Emily finally believed it. Emily had been left at the altar once, but life had given her something far better. A man who didn't just promise love, but proved it day after day. And on the quiet prairie of Silver Creek, They built the life they both thought they'd lost. Emily had been Caleb's wife for 3 months now, and life had settled into a rhythm. She milked the cow in the mornings, baked fresh bread, and kept the little house tidy. Caleb worked from dawn till dusk, mending fences, tending cattle, and breaking new ground for crops. But as summer turned to autumn, the rains never came. One morning, Caleb stood in the field staring at the cracked soil. If this keeps up, we'll lose. A week later, a wagon rolled into town carrying a woman and a little boy. Emily noticed them first at church, the woman sitting alone, the boy clinging to her skirts. There was something in the woman's eyes, a haunted look Emily recognized from her own heartbreak. Later, Emily introduced herself. "I'm Emily Turner. This is my husband, Caleb." The woman hesitated. "Margaret Cole," she said finally. "My husband passed last winter. We came west for a fresh start." Caleb nodded politely, but Emily felt something flicker across his face. Recognition? That night she asked him about it. "Do you know her?" Emily pressed Caleb's side. "Her husband, Tom. He served with me back in Kansas. Good man. He didn't make it through the winter." Emily's heart softened. "Then we should help her." Caleb looked. Helping Margaret turned into a bigger job than either of them expected. Caleb spent long hours repairing her roof, hauling water, and fixing her corral. Emily told herself she didn't mind. Margaret was a widow, after all. But when she saw Caleb teaching little Samuel how to tie knots, something twisted in her chest. That night she asked, "Do you think of Tom when you see her?" Caleb hesitated. "Sometimes. I think about how he'd want them looked after." Emily nodded, but her heart felt heavy. When the drought worsened, the strain deepened. Tempers flared one evening when Caleb came home late, exhausted and dusty. "You could have asked me to help," Emily said quietly, fighting to keep her voice even. "I didn't want to trouble you," Caleb replied. One hot afternoon, riders appeared on the ridge, 3 rough-looking men watching the homestead. Emily's stomach knotted. Caleb stepped onto the porch, hand resting near the rifle. "Can I help you?" he called. The leader grinned. "Heard you got fresh calves in the back pasture. Seems a shame for them to go hungry. Maybe we'll take a few off your hands." Caleb's voice was steady. "You'd best ride on." The men laughed and disappeared over the ridge, but Caleb knew they'd be back. That night he loaded the rifle and double-checked the barn door. Emily sat close, her heart pounding. "Will they come?" she asked. "Yes," Caleb said simply, "and we'll be ready." They came back 2 nights later. Emily woke to the sound of hooves. Caleb was already pulling on his boots. "Stay inside," he told her. But Emily followed to the porch, clutching the lantern. The outlaws rode into the yard, guns glinting. Caleb stepped forward. "You'll turn back now," the leader sneered. "Or what?" Then came the crack of a rifle, Caleb's warning shot splintering the fence post. The men hesitated, muttered curses, and finally rode off into the night. Emily rushed to Caleb, heart hammering. "What if they come back?" He wrapped an arm around her. "Then they'll find us ready." In that moment, Emily realized she wasn't the frightened girl who had been left at the altar. She was Caleb's wife, strong enough to... The rains finally came 2 weeks later, hard and fast, soaking the thirsty ground. Emily and Caleb stood together on the porch, watching the earth drink deep. Margaret and little Samuel came by the next morning to thank them. "We couldn't have made it without you," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. When they left, Emily turned to Caleb. "I was jealous, you know, of the time you spent with them." Caleb cupped her face in his hands. "I only have one home, Emily, and it's wherever you are." Her heart swelled. "Then let's make sure we never forget that, no matter how hard life gets." Caleb kissed her forehead. "Deal." And as the prairie turned green again, their love felt greener too, fresh, rooted deep, and ready to weather whatever storms might come next.
Like, share, and subscribe.